All right, I'm here with Chavonne Taylor, one of our guests from episode 10, where we spoke about trauma-informed care. We thought we'd sit down with her and have a little bit more, go into a little bit more detail about her work and her perspectives on education, because Chavonne has a very interesting backstory in terms of her path towards being the trauma educator and radio host that she is today. So, Chavonne, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
So, first question, we learned, well, I hear that you're a radio host and a trauma educator. I went to your website. You are a woman of many, many talents. Can you tell us a little bit about the work that you do?
So my background is actually sociology of childhood. That's where my degree is in. When I got out of college, I was working with children whose parents were incarcerated. Actually, I was doing this while I was working with, in college, working with children working with children who are in kinship care and foster care, things like that, group homes. And then I went on to work with pregnant parents and teens, and then kids who themselves were dealing with issues around the criminal justice system, and so forth and so on. So that's really like a huge chunk of my work background. And at the same time, I was also interning and learning about the radio industry. And so I started interning at KJLH, which is 102.3 here in LA. And I also worked at KPFK and interned at KPFK, which I'm still there now. And that's kind of where I realized that I wanted to connect the conversations that were happening in my community,
right,
and to a larger audience, as well as change who was invited to the conversations in the first place. When we would talk about issues surrounding our communities, I'm from South Central Los Angeles, and I grew up at the time, in the 90s, when it was really what people see on TV about
Boys in the Hood.
Yeah, and that was my life. So I didn't even like that movie as a kid because that was really my life.
Right.
And so, when we talk about these communities, a lot of times, especially in media, it's like those people over there. What are we going to do to help those people over there? But there really wasn't any conversation bringing those people to the forefront so they can speak for themselves and bring awareness to either their own community or to others outside of the community. So I said that's what I wanted to do. So that's kind of where my passion for media comes from, and I'm not letting that go. And I also want to use that as a platform to push things like trauma-informed care, because I feel like it's such an important conversation to have that should not stay in academic spaces, that should not stay in just therapeutic and medical spaces. We should be having this conversation in our communities, in our households on a regular basis, especially communities and families of color.
Right. Well, so you've done a bunch of work with regards to trauma and trauma training with professionals who are caregivers and within the caregiving realm. What do you think we as educators, those of us working in schools, are missing when it comes to trauma-informed care?
You know what they're really missing? The power they actually have. The problem is a lot of our teachers feel very powerless when it comes to the larger system, especially when you're talking about things that are happening in the community. So, for example, I'll get teachers who would say, these kids were traumatized when they got in my classroom. This it's the outside community, it's their households, it's whatever. But you have a lot more power in that space than you realize, because they're safe with you. That can be the space where they feel safe. That can be that introduction to empathy. But a lot of teachers don't realize they have that power. And we kind of look to outside spaces as being more in control of that. But I always recommend, focus on what you can do in that classroom, in that space, and don't try to take on the world. Because that's when you start having, stressing out because you can't help every student in the world and all that stuff.
So what do teachers need to do in that space to make it a space that is one that's safe for students and that reflects care and empathy?
Well, you want to have it, make sure it's a space of collaboration. You make sure it's a space of choice, space for connection, a space for consistency. And these are important because that is how you make sure that the children feel comfortable. If they don't feel safe with you, you're going to have all kinds of behaviors that are going to reflect that they don't feel safe. So I always recommend coming in with that perspective. Also, changing the way that we have to look at how we look at each other just as people, but also looking at how we address and work with children. Changing our complete thinking on that. No longer coming into the space with power over mentality. I must overpower you. But using our power, because the reality is you can't share power. You can't. We have more power than they do as an adult. They don't have as much say. They can't just, they have to get permission from their parents to do most things, right? So you're still in the power position as the adult. but how are we using that power? Are we using our power to be power over or power with? How do we use that power that we have as educators or as people who work with children to help guide them? So whether instead of them hanging off the cliff, trying to figure out how to, get back up on the cliff, and us going, how you shouldn't have did that. This was bad. I don't like the way you handled that situation. We say, no, let me get down there and help you up. Let me help you become someone who understands effective ways to get those needs met. But a lot of times teachers don't have that training or preparedness, or sometimes it's just difficult because it's hard to implement those things when you're being trained to do all kinds of other stuff.
Right. If I'm Mr. Math teacher and I know I got to teach certain lessons, certain standards because the test is coming up and I'm going to be judged on that test. You're telling me I have to, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say I have one tip though.
Okay.
This is the easiest tip for any teacher.
We want to hear that.
Your first day, do not come in with a set of rules. Don't have them on your board. Don't have none of that. Don't have a poster board that says, don't do this, don't do that. Don't even have that. Invite your space and say, hey, what kind of space what do you want to get out of this class? What do you want? What would make this class beneficial to you? And let them tell you.
Can't have just my list of 10 no's, no restroom, no this, no that, no that. I wouldn't put
any of that. What I would do is, what do they want? So write that down. Then you ask them, what is the goal? How can we meet these goals? This is our goal. You want to do this. You want to learn this way. You want to have fun. You want to be able to, whatever it is they decide. Right. And you say, well, how do we get there? What can we agree to get us there? What can we agree to? I agree to it as a teacher. You agree to it as students. What can we do to get there? Give them that space to collaborate with you. So it's not some rule that's imposed. I guarantee you, just opening up that conversation, that space, it changes everything. And like you said, you brought up the no this, no that. I always say from words like no and don't. Because you're telling kids what you don't want versus what you do want. So if the kid says, no hitting, that should be one of our agreements. Okay, respect each other's bodies. So we change, so that way they come from a place of positivity and to build from versus how do I just avoid doing that thing? Kids, for most people, you're going to find a way of loopholes around that.
Right. Absolutely. So now you commented on one of our episodes from season 1, the episode related to race and culture. We spoke about ethnic studies, and you posed a question about what good would ethnic studies courses or curriculums such as that be if at the end of the day the school system itself is still promoting a white supremacist curriculum where still it's about, Columbus came to America and these are the presidents and this and that. So I know that you have been skeptical about the public school system as it exists today. Can you tell us, if you were absolute commander of education, what's one of the first things that you would like to see changed? Change
the names of all these schools. Why do we have schools? You have schools full of Black and brown children named after people who were trying to murder them. Set up policies to murder them. Thomas Jefferson High Schools in South Central. Thomas Jefferson was a known rapist. We know this. On the record, he's a rapist.
Fact.
But yet and still we have schools named after him.
Right.
And we're saying, go Jefferson. We got to change. To me, that's the beginning of just changing the psyche of who are we honoring? Who are we representing? Who are our people? Right. So that's one of the first things I would do. Let's change that. Because until we can begin to unravel and unravel the nonsense a lot of us were taught about, because think about it, and this is my criticism of public schools, especially for, I say specifically Black children, but children of color in particular, which is we bring them and we put them in these schools and they learn nothing about themselves, but they know every lie about the people that oppress their people. They know every lie about that. They can sit there and tell you about Greeks and the Romans, and they could tell you about the, Thomas Jefferson and all this stuff, but nobody's talking about their history and who they are. I had never heard of the Moorish Empire till I was out of college. Never even heard of it. I heard the term Moor because I read Othello, but nobody broke down to me about who the Moors were. We were just told he's a Black guy.
Right.
So there's all these opportunities within the current curriculum to bring, and let's be honest, why are we reading just Shakespeare? Like, what makes Shakespeare so great? There's so many authors around the world we don't even get access to. But especially for Black children, they're not learning anything about African literature. They might have 1 or 2 books. I think I had 1 book, Things Fall Apart.
Yeah.
That was the only book I ever read.
Yeah.
From an author that wasn't honestly white.
Right.
I think I read that and Always Running by Luis Rodriguez. Like that was the 2 books I read.
Yeah.
And other than that, I was reading Pride and Prejudice. I'm learning more about, Europeans. So that's really, to me, that is what we have to change. Changing the way that we even teach children of color. Why are they learning all these lies and going to schools and after people who have done nothing but oppress them, and create laws to keep them oppressed? I heard people talk about if the forefathers saw Donald Trump, they'd be rolling in their grave. I said, no, they wouldn't.
No, they wouldn't.
They'd be proud. They said, this is what we were talking about.
Right. We love facts on all the above. So actually, I need to clarify, because your comment wasn't about the curriculum. It was about diversifying the teaching force, and would that really make the difference if the curriculum is still centered on whiteness and still European, Eurocentric? All right, so you have a fascinating. We've talked about origin stories on all the above in the past, with the idea that how a person became involved in education and the work, how that impacts their experiences and what they actually do. So your path towards being a community activist and trauma educator and all that you do started really young. It's actually a really interesting story. Can you tell us a little bit about how Chavonne Taylor came to be this dynamic trauma educator and community activist?
So growing up, I felt like I saw things in my neighborhood, in my community, in my schools. And outside of rap music, I really didn't have too many people talking about it. And that's one of the reasons why, like, to this day, I'm like super dedicated to hip hop and hip hop culture, because that was really the only space I feel like was talking about what I was seeing every day. How come nobody's talking about this? When I got to high school, I think that's where I became really vocal. I was always really involved in my community sort of thing. But I became really a firecracker once I was upset on my first day. And I was disappointed to learn that high school wasn't like Saved by the Bell. Because in my head, high school was going to be just like, I had watched all the teen NBC shows, right? So I saw California Dreams and Saved by the Bell and all, City Guys and all these shows based around high schools. And I kept thinking, I'm going to have a principal who likes us. We're going to have, chemistry. We're going to have beakers. We're going to do science experiments. It won't be anything like middle school where I didn't have anything. So then I get to high school, and they didn't even let me on the campus because I'm wearing overalls, which they assume are gang related, which it wasn't in 1998, by the way. It was not.
Right.
So that was one of those, like, okay, something's wrong here. And then further into my day and further to my life in high school, it was thing after thing after thing. If it wasn't the fact that we walked on campus and there's nothing but police there. As soon as that's who greets you in the morning, right? I was in the USC program in my high school, and I would go to USC, we took our first 2 classes at USC in the morning, then we would either walk back or get bused back to our high school, whether it was Manuel or Fauché. And during these particular days, the buses weren't available, so we had to walk. And we had police. We're the quote unquote, the good kids, right? And we're being harassed by the police. Now I kept thinking to myself, what if I was one of the gang members? What if I was one of the kids that the teachers never believed? What if I was one of those kids? And we just happened to, they tried to give us tickets. We were able to fight everything. But, if I was one of these other kids, I probably would have been in the back of that police car. So I thought about that. And that's when I realized something had to change. And somebody came to my class, and some students came to my class at a presentation around, it's called South Central Youth Empowered Through Action. And they were like, yo, we can change this stuff. And here's how, this is what we're doing. So we were working on a campaign to get $153 million to fix some of the cosmetic problems of the schools that needed it the most versus the schools that had better test scores. And we won that. So that was really the beginning, taking pictures. I would take pictures of the conditions at my school. So I sent it to Channel 7 News.
Nice.
We did a whole special on it. The superintendent, Roy Roman, had to do a whole press conference at my school after that.
Damn, real troublemaker right here.
Needless to say, my principal was not my biggest fan. But I was angry. I was angry because I kept saying, why is this happening? And that was my only concept of racism, was that I didn't know white people. My neighborhood, unless there was a teacher, you didn't know nobody white. So I hadn't even had the person that calls you the N-word or anything like that. My only definition of racism was I saw the kids in one neighborhood upset because they didn't have a pool. And in my class, we don't even have teachers in some of our classrooms. And some of our teachers didn't have enough books. So they have to make photocopies just so we could all have books in that class. So that was when I was like, yo, this has got to change. This is not okay. And that's when I really was like, okay, the world has to do something different. And in itself, I didn't know at the time that was trauma. I didn't know anything about what I was seeing. But one thing I did say is I felt very unwanted, unloved. But it's hard to really explain what that means, but I felt like, yo, how come nobody cares about us? that's what I felt like. And I fact, I vocalized that multiple times to like counselors and stuff. And people didn't really hear it, you know?
Yeah.
But now so going from there to being passionate about working with children, you know, and I didn't realize myself. So as I'm working with children, I'm working with abused children in particular, I didn't realize that until fairly recently that I myself had been abused. And that was part of the reason why I was so passionate about working with children and working with children who have been through some stuff. I'm very open about it now, because it's part of my work in media. I'm very open about my experience. I didn't know I had been abused because I didn't know it was abuse because it was so normal. It wasn't until I became an adult and started having problems around trauma responses myself, anxiety, depression, to the point where, you know, it became dangerous. And that's when I realized, when I started to, you know, learn about trauma and what was happening to me, like, oh, there's these connections between my experiences and what was happening to my body, happening to my mind. And when I started learning that, I said, this is the key. So many of us are dealing with this in so many ways, whether it's in our homes, whether it's in our schools, whether it's in our communities, whether it's just historical, especially people of color, we're dealing with this. And that's really how I got where I am now. It's like, that's where it started and that's where I am. It's like, I'm ready to change it.
Man.
And to make it happen.
You ain't slowed down since.
I won't.
Man, lovely. So now we have plenty of viewers who are like, okay, we need more Chavonne Taylor. And, you know, this interview is coming to an end. You have 2 radio shows. Tell us about those radio shows, because I want to drop some links in the description for folks to hear more from you. So
my radio justice show is called Lifestyle Radio. It started off something different, and then I switched it up a bit because I realized that one of the other things that we don't talk about is that there are people who are doing some amazing things, and a lot of them don't even realize it's amazing. They just started doing it. Right. But we don't talk about people who are doing amazing things in our community enough. So I mostly interview people of color, and I always want to highlight like people who are doing things like building a business, you know, and doing something innovative in a whole new way. But the problem is because so many things don't get covered in our communities. Like as soon as somebody gets shot, that's all over the news, right? We might get a few blogs that let us know that there's a Black-owned business that's doing some nice stuff, but it doesn't really get coverage. It doesn't really become a conversation. With Lifestyle Radio, the concept is also to learn from these people who are saying like, hey, I was in this space and now I'm here and here's how I got here. And it's called Lifestyle because it's my thing is about being a star in your own life. We honor celebrities so much. We don't know how to look and check in with ourselves and say, wait a minute, I can be great too. So I like to have people who have been great, people who were once scared to start whatever product it was. Like one woman, she started a hip hop charity in South Central where she gets artists, music artists from all over the community, whether underground or mainstream, whoever, to donate and help fund kids to go to college, pay for their dorm fees. This is just a small organization, and she just started. And she said when she started, that's when she learned that there were other people doing similar things. And so that's what I wanted Lifestyle to be. I wanted people to realize that they could also be change makers. And even if they don't change the world, they could change themselves, heal, and figure out what's going on within themselves. So that's what Lifestyle is. Flip the Script is more of a community interest show. So I might even interview some of the same people, but the conversation will be different. So if you're an author, and we're talking about, like I interviewed an author not too long ago who's a Black male who does work around trauma. And so the show is mostly about his work and his book and things like that. But when we get on Flip the Script, when we get on Lifestyle, it's about him and his journey and how he got there and how we ended up in this space where he's creating these other things. So those are the shows. I'm hoping people like them. Flip the Script is on KPFK 90.7 FM. We air 7:30 on Wednesdays, and we are also available on the website kpfk.org, and you can get Lifestyle Radio on radiojustice.org. Just look up Lifestyle Radio.
Boom, there you have it. Look in the description. We have links to all that. Chavonne, thank you for being on our show, and thank you for this extra one-on-one with us. I hear that perhaps we may be able to be on one of your shows at some point if we could be so honored. So definitely make sure you subscribe to our channel so you can get updates about that. All right, thank you all.